Okay, so over here we are with chapter number 4, that is habitats and food chain, and we are starting with the topic 4.1, that is habitats. All right, it is there on page number 7070 in your books. Kindly open it down. Now, when we talk about habitats, first of all, we need to know the definition of it. That what do we mean by the word habitats? All right. So over here you have your definition, that is the habitat is a place where an animal lives. It may be land, water, air, desert, or forest, where an animal eats, lives, grows, and brings up its babies. So this becomes your definition as your habitat. Like habitats is any place where the animal lives. Now, there are different habitats according to the needs of different animals. Now, when we talk about habitats, animals need to live on a comfortable place where they find enough land for them to survive openly, water to drink, air for oxygen and to breathe, deserts or forest. All right, any place where they have all the basic necessities of life, that place becomes the best place for living for such animals. All right, and when we talk about habitats, we have enormous of habitats, such as over here. Let me show you one example of it, like Arctic, desert, ocean, grassland. All right, because habitat is a natural place for an animal to live. When we talk about pet animals, you can keep your pet at your home, but animals again, they need separate place for them to live. If you want to keep the pets with you, you can do it, but it's always better to keep all the animals in an open environment so that they can live peacefully over there, because animals are the creatures who love to survive freely. All right, they cannot be caged up and they cannot be um, just kept and to be put on a place where they are not allowed to move freely. Okay. Now, when we talk about plants and animals, both, there are different terminologies that we get to know when we are reading about this topic, habitats. All right. When we talk about ecosystem or environment, we must know that environment, in our environment there are different living things, including humans, plants and animals, and somehow or the other they are all depending on one another for survival. Now over here, if you can see that plant has an arrow to animals, animals has an arrow to the environment, and then environment back to plants. Now, what does this picture imitates us? It shows us that how these steps of interdependence revolves from one species to another. All right. Now over here, if you can see, they are showing you that the plants and animals depends on each other. Now, in the different ways that animals and plants are interdependent is an ecosystem, because they depend on each other for basic survival needs like food, protection, shelter, and propagation. Plants provide food for animals and humans who cannot make their own food like plants do. Now, when we talk about plants in our ecosystem, the first thing that we talk will be plants in our living things. Why? Because plants make their own food through sunlight and water from the soil, right? So, who depends on plants? Animal depends on plants. Animals plants पर depend करते हैं. Why? In order to eat the plant. And sometimes plants also depends on animals. All right. Why do you think that plants depends on animals? As we have discussed in yesterday's class about fertilizers, soil gets fertilized because of animals' dung. All right. So plants also depends on animal, and the dependence of both plants to animals and animals to plants is said to be the interdependence of both these species. All right, दोनों एक दूसरे के ऊपर जो डिपेंड करते हैं, इसको हम इंग्लिश में क्या कहते हैं? We call this as interdependence. Now over here, let me give you a very clear definition of this word interdependence. That interdependence is the relationship between two or more living things where each one benefits from the other. When we talk about two living things, we are saying plants, we are keeping plants and animals in our mind. That plants depends on animals and animal depends on plants in order to survive, in order to live peacefully in your ecosystem. Your ecosystem is your world, is your environment that you live in. So that becomes the interdependence of both these species. ठीक है? Now over here in the last image also they are explaining you the same thing as plants and animals depends upon each other as mutual interdependence is a must for their survival. Plants provide shelter for animals and they make oxygen for the animals to live. When animals die, they decompose and become natural fertilizers for plants. Plants depends on animals for nutrients, pollination, and seed dispersals. Right? You have done this pollination, seed dispersal, and everything in your previous grade 5, right? We have done a separate chapter for that. Acham. When we talk about survival and interdependency, it does not always means for the eating purpose. All right. When we talk about survival, we means there are different terms and there are different techniques to survive. It's not always about eating and it's not always about hunger. ठीक है सर्वाइवल में हमारे पास शेल्टर भी आता है सो सम एनिमल्स हु आर कार्निवोरस they even they depends on plants for their shelter. All right, now which are carnivorous animals? The ones that eat flesh or meat. Even they need plants for their survival. Why? Because they need plants for a shelter in the hot weather, right? So somehow or the other, plants and animals, they both depend on each other, and this um, cycle is known as interdependence of